Throw the ball in. A couple of questions for people, and you want to be able to answer these. What few Blayney people are there? Real Blayney people, Jordan. I must say, most of us are real Blayney people, in fact. A question, of course, and I know Father Seamus can answer this one. The Assyrian came down like a wolf from the fold, and his cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold. And the sheen of their spears was like stars on the sea when the blue wave rolled nightly on deep Galilee. The poet is? Seamus down there, he is, no? Yeah. Come on, give us the poet there.
You're embarrassing me now.
Sorry? That, of course, is written by one of the boys in the band, the Romantic poets, Byron himself, Lord Byron. The poem is The Destruction of Sennacherib. We all learned it at some stage at school, I think. I quoted Destruction of Sennacherib because I was going to call this talk The Destruction of Lord Hope's Demesne. Now, as a grumpy old man, I'm going for a personal best number of gripes this morning over what's happened to the Hope Demesne over the last 30 years. The sheer, for want of a better word, vandalism, official and unofficial, that has happened to our demesne. This, of course, you all know is the Hope Castle itself. And the correct name for it is Lord Hope's Demesne. It is not Mucknow Park, and never was, and indeed never should be. Now, the reason why we should not call it Mucknow Park is, number one, we always called it the Demesne, didn't we?
We did.
And nothing else. Also, we're not in Mucknow here, right? Mucknow only applies to the monastic land on the other side of the lake. And the original parish of Mucknow was only on the Mullyash side of the lake, not on this side of the lake. We're actually sitting today in the parish of Clontibret. Now, after the Reformation, and Queen Elizabeth I was applying the Reformation in this area, of course, the monastic lands were taken over, the monastery was closed down, and the land on the far side of the lake was given to a man called Henry Bagnall, and they called that the parish of Mucknow. Now, because it's monastic land, it was originally what's called a termon, not a parish, and termon were much smaller than parishes. Now, in the case of Enniskeane, which is the other termon land in Monaghan, Enniskeane was originally a very small parish beside Dunamine, which was a huge parish. So what the Church of Ireland bishops did was they took a big slice of Dunamine and they gave it to Enniskeane to balance the size of the two parishes. Now here where we're sitting was McMahon land originally, given to Edward Blayney, and we're sitting in the parish of Clontibret, but Clontibret was a huge parish. Mucknow was a small parish, so what they did was they cut a piece of this side of the lake off Clontibret and gave it to Mucknow. And the correct name of our parish is, of course, the parish of Mucknow and Upper Clontibret. We're in Upper Clontibret. The name Mucknow does not apply on this side of the lake, okay? So it should not apply to this thing that they call here. The second thing about calling it Lord Hope's Demesne is, when you speak to Americans, Americans understand about the Hope, and they know about the Hope Diamond. And it's surprising how many Americans have actually visited the Smithsonian and have seen the diamond. And it is we should have a selling point. If you want to get American tourists to come to this town, or any tourists, sell the diamond. Let's get the Hope name back on the town. It would be a good selling point. Now, an interesting thing was, there was a lady came from California. She was driving around on her holidays around Ireland by herself in a car, youngish lassie. And she was driving from Derry. She came down from Derry to Castleblayney, and she was here, and I did a bit of research on her family for her. She had a wonderful Castleblayney name. She was called Margie Hughes, right? Different Margie Hughes. So we were speaking to Margie and we're having a cup of coffee and she says to me, what sort of an animal is an ulster? And I thought to myself, what? Do you mean otter or what's an ulster? No, she says, must be an animal of some sort called an ulster. And I couldn't figure that out. This is what you mean, where'd that come from? Oh, she says, as I was driving down the road, I saw this thing called the Ulster Park, right? And I had to explain to her, that's the Ulster American Folk Park. It's nothing to do, she thought an Ulster was an animal and this was someplace like a buffalo park or that you kept Ulsters in. And I had to explain to her, no. And the same is true at Mucknow. Nobody knows what a Mucknow was, right? What sort of an animal a Mucknow is. But everybody has heard of the Hope Diamond. So let's get back using the word hope as a selling point for the town. Another thing about the spelling, the word Demesne, right, has a silent S in the middle of it. Lovely one for children to be able to spell. Anyone know any other word has a silent S in the middle of it? But Demesne does. Lovely word, please. Preserve the word Demesne. And of course, the difference between an estate, a park, and a domain. A park is where you play football, right? That's it. St. Mary's Park, Crow Park. Okay? An estate is the land that was owned by the Hopes. And that covers the whole parish, everywhere you can see from Tone Point, right, up to, on that side, Carna. And originally the Blayney estate not only includes all the land around Castleblayney, it included all the land around Monaghan town as well. But the Hope estate here at Castleblayney ran to something like 30,000 acres, okay? But most of it was leased out to farmers, right? So the farmers in Knockagollis were on the Hope estate. The farmers in Dromalish were on the Hope estate. But the domain is different. The domain is the personal land that he lived on. It was his own front garden, if you like. It's where his house was. It was his personal bit. And that's what a domain is, which is completely different from the estate. So this place here is the Hope Domain. You all agree? Okay. Right. In moving on, there are many islands on the lake. The lake all being part of the domain as well as the estate. And I'm not going to talk about the other side of the lake. The foreigners out in Orem can do their own research. This side of the lake. There are no crannogs on the lake. A crannog is an artificial island built about 2,000 years ago on a lot of the small lakes around Ireland, right? In total in County Monaghan, there are about 75 to 80 crannog on our different lakes. But there's none in Loch Mucknow. One, it's too deep, right? You couldn't build an artificial island. The way they built the island was they took huge trunks of oak trees out into the middle of the lake, weighed them down, then piled soil on top of it, then put more tree trunks and then put more soil. And they kept building it up till they built an island, and then they flattened the top of it and they lived on it, okay? And crannogs are artificial, and they're in much shallower lakes. Loch Mucknow is number one, too deep, and the flow of the water, particularly down here at the bridge and down that side of the lake, the flow is too fast. They couldn't have gone in to build artificial islands. Anyone wants to see lovely artificial crannogs? There's a lovely one on Shantana Lake. If those who know where Shantana is, you can see it from the road if you drive up that way. But by far the best example of a crannog in our parish is this one, right? And you can see the artificial island. That's pictures clear enough there to everyone? Yep. And this crannog is on St. Patrick's Lake. Now, St. Patrick's Lake is in Dromore townland, out beside Dromore, the old Dromore National School, just along the border. Right, Don McCooey is Cora McCooey there? Where Cora lived, it's just in front of the McCooey's house. Out there, sorry? No, it's St. Patrick's Lake it's called. And there's two lakes in one. And this lake is in the Free State, south of the border. The other lake is in the 6 counties, and the border actually runs through the lake. This is an artificial island, and it's one of the biggest crannog in Monaghan, and we have it just out the road here, 3 or 4 miles. Drive out past it, you can park your car on the road and you can see it. Lovely circular crannog, okay? Now, when it was in use 2,000 years ago, it would have looked something like this. The top nicely flattened, people all build their huts, and then they put a wooden fence around the rim of the island. And the wooden fence, while they think of it as protection from enemies, it's not. It's more for children, to stop children falling into the water or animals escaping or whatever. And that's roughly what our crannog would have looked like. Now, there is one in St. Patrick's Lake, and there's one in Milltown Lake, but because the levels of some of the waters have dropped, right, the crannog appears to be like a peninsula rather than an island, but we do have quite a number of them, and there's dozens of them between Lochagish, Rockcurry, you know, where all those small little lakes are. They're built more in sheltered lakes rather than big wide open lakes like Loch Mucknow, okay? Now, to anyone who know the stories of St. Patrick's Lake out at Dromore here, there was a pilgrimage to it every year, and the pilgrimage took place on the 29th of June, which you all know is the feast of... Sorry? 29th of June. St. Peter and St. Paul. And there was an annual pilgrimage out to St. Patrick's Lake, and hundreds used to turn up at it, and the priests would turn up, and there'd be religious ceremonies, a bit like Loch Derg on a smaller scale. And there's a rock there, and on the rock there's a handprint of St. Patrick, because St. Patrick's supposed to have stopped at this lake. And the story is, when he was slaying a serpent, he put his hand on the rock to keep himself steady, and his... Okay, that's the legend. Now, 2 men have written about the pilgrimage to St. Patrick's Lake. One of them is one of the Kiernans from, is it Drumakill, the Kiernans are in, who wrote to a Belfast newspaper and explained the pilgrimage. And another was the historian of South Armagh called Kevin McMahon, and Kevin died last year. And Kevin did wonderful research on the border areas of Cullihan and Cullerville and Crossmaglen and so on. And in the pilgrimage, people turned up. However, in the 1790s, hundreds turned up, and the whole thing evolved into faction fighting, and there must have been a bit of poaching going around as well, and they were fighting. And the bishops eventually decided to ban the pilgrimages. So people technically were, but they still kept going in smaller numbers. And I know in the 1950s an attempt was made to resurrect the pilgrimage. And the pilgrims stood in this field here in front of the picture, and must have had an association with the crannog. But the crannog is pre-Christian, right? It's a Celtic thing, it's not religious in any way. But people still remembered it. So we had a pilgrimage in the parish, and that was in that lake. But coming back to crannogs and to our own lake, there were no crannogs in Loch Mucknow. Loch Mucknow is too big, it's too deep, and the flow of water from top to bottom is too fast. There are, of course, 11 islands on the lake which have names. And of course, you all know the 11 islands on the lake. And I asked Paul Short down, and everybody, of course, starts off the Black Island and the White Island, and then they tend to stop, right? So, explaining the 11 islands, and make a list of these sometime, and when this is recorded, you can copy them down if you want to. I'm going to start down at the bottom first, and I'll show you them here on the map. This is a Google Earth map, by the way. It does call that Mucknow Park, and gripe one, don't like Mucknow Park. Right away down at the bottom here, you have a thing called Tome Point. You all know Tome Point. And down here we have the bridge at Tome today, where Roddy McCorley went to die. Now, different Tome Bridge, but it's our Tome Bridge. God, I'm losing this. There's a little island here, can you see it? Yeah. And this is called Tory Island, okay? So we have a Tory Island on the lake. Now, why it's called Tory Island, I have no idea, but there is in 1715, and I had a copy of it, and I couldn't find it before today, I have it somewhere at home. It's a reward given for a man called James Lamb, who was a highwayman. I was a highwayman on the coach roads I did ride, sword and pistol by my side. Anyway, a big reward was offered for James Lamb, and we all know where the Lambs live. They live out at Tone Point. Did he hide on that island? And the word Tory, of course, means, it's the Irish for a highwayman. Is that why it's called Tory Island? I have no idea. But I'm just making a very, very, very loose connection between Lamb and that island, and the island is called Tory Island, okay? Now the second island, if you come up, if you come up to here, you can see the arrow on the, yeah, that's okay. There's a little island here just off the shore, and it's called White's Island. No, not the White Island. It's White's Island, but the reason it's called White's is that most of the farms along the shore there belong to a family called White. The house that Demesne Kelly, you know, the hairdresser lives in out there, Kelly's live in, was originally White's farm. And along the very shore of the lake, there's an old ruin. And funny, I saw a building application on it there recently. There was a very old house, and it was also owned by a family called White. So the island is called White's Island because it's beside the White farm, okay? The other, in this part of the lake, we'll call it the Tone part of the lake, there are two islands, Tory and White's. Over here, and again you can't see this from the Hope Castle because it's hidden behind Conquer Wood, if you look out that way. There's an island here, and this is Crane Island South, okay? But there's a wee bit has broken off it, I think because the level of the water is dropping slightly. There's no name on the little bit here. So, do you count it as an island or do you not? But the island, the big island here itself is called Crane Island. Now, when you look out from Conquer Wood back towards the town, or look at the Hope Castle out towards Conquer, you'll see in the lake here 3 small islands. And they are Crane Island North, with a wee bit taken off it, Otter Island North, and Otter Island South, okay? So that gives a total so far of 6 islands on the lake. Now, why they're called otters and cranes, I've no idea, other than the fact there must have been otters nesting on them or something, or cranes' nests at some stage. The next 2 islands you can't see from the town. You have to go to the back of the Black Island and look the other way, but if you want to see them properly, drive round the lake. You all know the viewing point round the lake. Drive round there and park your car and have a look down, and you'll see 2 islands. And this one here is called Garmany's Island, after a man called Hugh Garmany. And Hugh Garmany in the 1700s was a big landholder here, a big middleman for the Blayney estate, and he collected all the rents and he collected tithes, and he was a big organiser for Lord Blayney. He also gave the bit of land further out where the Presbyterian church is built, and of course the church out there is called Garmany's Grove, again after the Garmanys. That's Garmany Island, and there's a little one just touching the shore up here. See the little island there? And for some reason that's called Harper's Blind Island. Now, I don't know who Harper was, whether it's a man's name or whether he was a harper. I don't know if he was blind, or if they mean by blind that you can't see anything from it. You know, in the way you're coming up to a corner, you think of it a blind corner. But we do know, of course, that Carolan was a piper, and was he blind? Was he the blind harper? I'm not sure, but the island on our lake is called Harper's Blind Island, okay? The 2 you know, of course, then are the White Island and the Black Island, right? That's 10. Tory, White's, the 2 cranes, the 2 otters, that's 6. Garmany 7, Harper's Blind is 8, White Island's 9, the Black Island is 10, and the missing island is Horse-Island, or sometimes in some of the references I saw, Horseshoe Island. Now, you all know where Horse-Island is. Unfortunately, it's been built on top of, and it's not an island anymore, but it's got a name. This is the 1860 map of the town of Castleblayney, a piece cut out of it. Some people may recognise it or not recognise it. This road coming down here, you see it, is the road there, going down to the lake. All right? This here is Gillespie's garden, which is just behind us here. This is the ice house, right? So that's where the children's car park is, right? So everyone knows where we are. We're walking down to the lake, turning at that wee sharp right-hand bend. Now that road initially went straight over to the White Island. There was no road down to the Black Island there. So we come along here to where the road was, about here, and Mrs. Hope built a road across here, right across here, and you see what this is? Horse Island. It's a little island where that coffee thing with the diesel fumes coming out of it sits and gives people coffee. You know where that is? That's Horse Island. And when you walk across or jump onto Horse Island and go across to here, then the drawbridge is here over to the Black Island. So to get to the Black Island, you have to go down the causeway onto Horse Island and then onto the bridge and then onto the Black Island. So you know where Horse Island is now. You can see it is an island. It's surrounded by water, right? It was an island originally, but today it doesn't look like an island. Now, one of the reasons, of course, one of the islands is called Crane Island is because of the cranes in the reeds. Now, I took that photograph last winter, was very pleased with it. I think it's a great photograph. And cranes always look so sad, don't they? Yeah. And that's him down in the rushes there at the Black Island. I just want to show you that because I think it's a nice photograph I took. Go back yourself someday for a nice walk or a nice drive. Go out to Tone Point, you know where Joe McGrath lives, you know those houses just down there, and look out onto the lake and you'll see Tory Island. And that's Tory Island, right? Inaccessible, quite nice. It looks a bit like a Crannock, but it's not. It's all these islands have been investigated. It's not a Crannock. It's a real island. This one is White's Island. And you see how close it is to the shore, and that's where all those speedboats go in, you know. Those who've been around the lake know what I'm talking about. And that's White's Island, very close to the shore, right? Now, if you walk on up past White's Island up to the left there, of course you come to the South Lodge. The South Lodge is the southernmost point of the Hope Domain, the personal land belonging to the Hopes. So if you walk from the castle gates to South Lodge, that's the domain, okay? And nobody should live on the domain except Lord Hope and the people who work for him as gardeners, as foresters, and so on. And the person who lived in the South Lodge was either the forester or the farmer, or whatever. He worked on the estate, okay? Beautiful house. I'll show you a bit more detail of South Lodge in a moment. Now go up to Conquerwood, the golf club, and you can look south towards, you can see Slieve Gullion in the distance there, in South Armagh, and you can see there Crane Island south. You see it stuck in the middle there? You're looking down towards the point of Conquerwood. Look across the lake, and you will see, this is looking out from the restaurant at the golf club, okay? Looking straight out the window. There's a wee clump of trees here. And that's where McMahon's castle was, for want of a better word for it. And beyond that, on the other shore, of course, is Mullindoy, the monastery. And you can see some of the islands on the lake. Again, from Conquerwood, look up the lake, right, northwards, and you can see Otter Island south, Crane Island north, Otter Island north. You see here in the distance, Garmany Island. And away up here near the shore, tiny little one, that's Harper's Blind, okay? On this side, of course, you have the White Island and the Black Island to the left, and further here to the left, the White Hill. Right, so everyone knows where all the islands are. Now you've got names for them. Remember the names and tell people what the names are. We're going to lose them Because a lot of people here, even real Blaney people, had never heard of Harper's Blind Island or Tory Island or names like that. They are on the maps, they're on the ordnance surveys, they are real names. I'm not making them up. Now, when you look back towards the castle, of course, you see the White Island. White Island is very strangely blondie looking. You see it here? I don't know why the stones all look very white from here. You see the castle and how the castle dominates the lake, right? And no, I didn't take a picture of the castle close up. It looks better from the distance for obvious reasons. And this is a great photograph. It also shows you how dominant the Church of Ireland is. You see it up here with its spire, and it's put in a very prominent position as well. In fact, when you stand up at the Church of Ireland, it doesn't look as prominent a site, but it is a very, very prominent site over the lake and so on. That's the White Hill to the left, of course. And when you look down from there, you see, well, what's now Cummiskey's. This is the Pheasantry, it was called. And the person who lived in that house, who worked for the Hope Estate, was the man who looked after the game birds. And he made sure there were partridges and pheasants and grouse and all the different birds that on the glorious 12th of August, Lord Hope went out with his shotgun and shot them all. So he bred the pheasants. And there used to be big, you remember nettings? Cages? No, there were cages all around that where he kept the pheasants. And his job was to make sure when Lord Hope wanted to go hunting, that there were plenty of birds coming out of the... Right. I always maintain all that grouse shooting and all would be a fairer sport if you get the birds a shotgun and they could shoot back at them, but they couldn't. That was called the Pheasantry, because the man who lived in it was responsible for breeding the pheasants and getting them out. This is a photograph of McMahon's Castle. It was given to me by Maura O'Reilly. Now, I thought that was more in the picture, but it's not. She's got glasses. The girl in the picture, either Paul Shortman was one of the Moore girls, right, or one of the friends of Maura O'Reilly's from New Street, from that area of the town, out at the castle, right? And that was all I remember was left of it. It was just a sort of a bit of a round wall with a couple of windows in it. Now, some people may remember who were out in it. Yeah, I don't know what's left of it. Is there anything out there, Paul? There's still a wee bit. Yeah. Now, it's called McMahon's Castle, not because it was ever a castle. That castle actually stood here, beside the Hope Castle. And in the 1790s, when Lord Blaney was building the new castle, what we call the Hope Castle today, he needed sand and stone, and he took a lot out in from Conquerwood. He dug quarries out in Conquerwood. And as the barges were coming in across the lake, full of sand and stones, they floated nicely on the surface of the lake. But when they were going back out, they were very light, and they bubbled too high in the water. So what he did was he dismantled part of the old ruined castle and put it in these boats and took it out to Conquerwood and rebuilt it as a folly in the woods, as a sort of a talking point, right? And it's part of the castle here, and they call it McMahon's Castle because it was captured by the McMahons during the rebellion of 1641. It's an in-joke on the people of Blaney. Right? That's actually Blaney Castle, it should be called. Now, other bits of the stones in this castle are used particularly in building the wall across here. Just go inside the gate and walk over to the wall there and look at it. And you see lovely wee bits of cut stone in it, right? Which obviously have come from somewhere else. But since that wall was built in 1800, it must have come from somewhere. Where did it come from? The only cut stone we had around here was in the old ruined castle, so they dismantled the castle and reused the stone. And that's what it looked like, 1960s. This is the original Ordnance Survey map of the 1830s. And again, it shows the lake, the upper half of the lake. And as you go round, you can see where the different islands are. Here you have Harper's Blind, Garmany, Otter Island North, with no wee sister, the Black Island, of course. The Black Island had a flagpole on top of it, right? And of course, there's a house on the Black Island, the only one of the islands that somebody lived on. There was originally McBride's house out at the back of the island. And you can see here what is obviously some sort of open pasture land as well. It was part of a farm as well as being a forest. And this is the White Island in all its glory as well. It's obviously an island. Horseshoe Island or Horse Island is here. It's so close to the shore they don't actually draw it as an island. There's no bridge in this. There was no bridge across to the Black Island where we know the bridge to be. There was a very small wooden bridge further down at the back of Levy's Chemist, you know, there. Mm-hmm. And they used the Black Island to take timber off it for building and firewood and things like that. But it wasn't a walking place, right? So you didn't need to get across to the Black Island too often. Certainly not in the 1830s. Now this is the southern part of the lake, also taken from the original Ordnance Survey maps of the 1830s. There's great detail in these maps, done by the Royal Engineers, of course. There was a lady from, her father was from 3 Mile House, but he was married in Birmingham, and his daughter married a British soldier who didn't come home too often in the 1980s, and he was in the Royal Engineers, and he showed me a fantastic Ordnance Survey map that the British Army had done from aeroplanes, photographing the whole border areas, and then updated the Ordnance Survey maps fabulously. But he couldn't give me one to take home because all the British military installations along the border were marked on it. It would look a bit dodgy. But it was the best Ordnance Survey map I've seen in the area. This is the 1830s and very accurate. There's Crane Island North, Otter Island North. The 2 islands are down here, Tory and White's Island are down here. They're not quite on it. This is the graveyard at Mullindoy, right? And this is Conquer Wood, where is the golf club. A number of things you'll notice. Number one, there's no temple. So the temple was not built in the 1830s. It's quite a more recent building. And those who know the temple, there was a tremendous amount of red brick in it. But red brick only came to the town. I'm talking about good red brick. We did make a very poor, dusty red brick in the town in very small quantities. And our brick field was up where Sean Donnelly lives, you know, up beside Laurel Hill. And somebody up there made bricks in very, very small quantities. But when red bricks become massive is after the railway. And the railway came to the town in the 1850s, so then they could bring in red brick in huge quantities. And the temple, of course, is red brick built almost completely. Also, too, the 2 buildings were in here, the one across the street, and this one has huge red brick on the front of it, all imported on the railway. So if something has an awful lot of red brick, it's after 1850. So the temple is definitely after 1850. It's a more recent building. But the farmyard is there. You see it here? You all know the Barns, it's called. You can see it from the hurling field when you look up on the hill. It's ruined now, and as you drive up to the golf club, it's in on the right there. You know, you all know where the Barns are. Okay, it's there. The ruins, that's McMahon's Castle, is marked on it. There's a little house here called a rustic cottage. I don't know what that means. But there's a wee cottage which isn't there anymore today. And of course, down at the other end, on the point down here, see here? There's a cottage. There was a little cottage. And that's where, well, the Belfast Steps were. Now, the Belfast Steps were called the Belfast Steps, this cottage, because the last Lord Blaney had such terrible debts, right? And he was living here in the castle. And all these debtors would come every day looking for their money. And he would get on a boat and he'd go out on the lake and he'd hide in that cottage we had in Conquer Wood. And the butler here in the castle would say to the debtors, sorry, he's going to Belfast. No, he wasn't going to Belfast. But then it got the name, the Belfast Steps, because that's where he stopped with the boat. He went round the Conquer Wood and landed, and he sat in that cottage and drank it himself, blind as he was out there. But a lot of the features of it, that, well, some of them are still there, and some of them are buried under the destruction caused by the Golf Cup. Anyway, that's another gripe. You all know. Now, the personal domain of Lord Blayney stretches from the castle gates here down to here, right, and on down. And it was his own personal estate. He could drive around it. There's nobody living on it other than the people who work for him. And he could shoot grouse and he could do whatever he wanted to fish and sun himself and drink whatever he liked doing. This is the modern, sorry. Never get back with this, sorry. Might have stepped too far there. This is a 1910 Ordnance Survey map, which is more modern, and I've just blown it up to show you the Black Island in all its glory here, and the paths around it. This is one of that's Otter Island North over there. The White Island. There was a little island here going out to the White Island, which doesn't have a name, so I don't count it as one of our 11. And here, Mrs. Hope has built the causeway we know there today onto the Black Island. But there's no bridge. There's a ferry. And Margie Hughes saw a photograph in the Gillespie collection. It's not a photograph that I've seen, which was taken sometime in the 1890s of the ferry. Now, the ferry was simply like a flat board. It wasn't a ferry, a very flat boat. But there was a big metal wheel in it. And there was a rope across to the Black Island. So you got on the ferry here and you turned the wheel. And as you turned the wheel, it wrapped up the rope and took the boat across to the Black Island. And then when you wanted to come back, you turned the wheel the other way, and that took you back here. And that ferry worked for a while. There was also a wooden bridge further down that you could walk over as well. So we had a ferry before we had a drawbridge. Right? All strange things. This is the causeway. You all know it today. Now, when you go down this path, the children's car park is in here to the left, right? The children's playground, sorry, is in to the left. The White Island's over there to the right. Now, Mrs. Hope took this area in front of us, we can see, and filled it full of rubbish to make a causeway, right? On the left-hand side of that, there's a huge drain. You know what? It's the biggest shock you've ever seen. And that was to drain the water. And down the right-hand side of that path, there's a wall, and the wall is to keep the lake from flooding in. And it's a causeway that we now walk, even without thinking about. It's not a natural path or surface. It's an artificially created. But when you get to the end of it, you know this little risen bit here? Before you go onto the bridge, that's Horse Island, okay? So every time you walk there, would you tell people, we're going to cross Horse Island as we're going over the drawbridge. And the drawbridge, of course, is down at the end. This is one of what people say is an ice house on the estate. Now, we know there's an ice house up on Barney's Green. There was another ice house down. I don't think this is an ice house. This is described on the Old Ordnance Survey as a hydraulic ram. And that suggests to me that it's some sort of a pump in it which took water from the lake and pumped it up to the castle, either to water the orchards or the gardens or whatever, or possibly even to put water into the house. We're talking time when there's no running water and so on. There was a hydraulic pump in that. Now, it's the same design as the ice houses, but I don't think it's an ice house. Requires a bit of digging just to see what's in there. Unfortunately, it's vandalized a lot, and there's a chair in it, a plastic tubular steel chair, and I don't know what they're doing about it. It's an unholy mess. As I say, we have in our town a lot of Sorry?
There's somebody living in that.
Somebody?
Yeah. Living in there.
There's somebody living in it?
Yeah.
Oh, God. We have a lot of unofficial vandals in the town as well. Right? Sorry?
I think above that, just directly above that.
There is a pump. I'll show it to you in a minute. Yeah, I have it in a later photograph. Now, this after the ferry was done away with onto the Black Island, they built this bridge. If somebody knows who that man is, who is it? Is Charlie Lockman there, no? Somebody give me a name for that person who's walking the bridge. Now, anyone who's old enough, like I am, remembers that bridge over to the Black Island. Not exactly the safest thing to be walking on, very wobbly. It was just simply a series of loose planks tied together, and you went across to the Black Island, okay? And it was down parallel to where the bridge is today. It's not a drawbridge. In other words, it doesn't fold up or anything. It's just a bits of wood, trees taken off the island and tied together to get us across, right? And if you're old enough, you remember it, okay? You can still see where the endings of it were. They're still down there, but the plank, the woods and all has been taken away. They couldn't put a causeway across here because it would have stopped the flow of the river, okay? They couldn't stop the flow of the water. And of course, everybody remembers the rock, don't you? Down at Horse Island at some stage in the 70s, there was a sailing club or something, or there was water safety thing. Remember, there was a lot of boats down there. But just out off the shore here, you see it there? Yeah. There was a huge rock used to stick out of the water. I don't remember when I was a child, you'd see it there. Massive rock. County Council decided to take it away because the boats that were sailing in there would crash into it. Now you could see it, so they could see it, put a wee red light on it or something. But taking it away has the terrible destruction is you can't put it back. It's gone completely. But how many people remember that rock? You do? Yeah. And as you walked down to the back end, you looked there and it was sticking out of the water. Now it's not an island, it's a big lump of rock. Huge. But it's gone, unfortunately. We only have a point. This is Horse Island here. This bit, sorry. This bit, and that's the point over there. So you're looking towards the point, right? And you can see the big rock there? Yeah. That's the rock. A famous feature. And this, of course, is the boathouse down along the shore here. And this part of it is still standing. You can go in and have a look around it, but don't fall in or anything. One thing you'll notice about it is completely built of red brick. Therefore, it's Mrs. Hope's building. It's after 1850. And that's where she kept her boats down there. It was roofed, I remember it, with a wooden roof and so on. But not anymore. It's another thing which is in a state of destruction. This is Conquer Wood later on. And you can see now the temple has been built. Right? And the temple is built on such a spot. Now it looks off centre, but the reason why it's in that spot is that if you stand there in the middle of the gates, right, and look straight down the avenue, the temple is in the middle of what you're looking at. It's lined up with the gates, and it's lined up with the avenue here. Now a lot of people will notice the avenue, and I know you've all noticed this. The avenue is an artificial creation. Originally, it was on the side of a hill, so Lord Blaney filled it in so we'd have a nice flat avenue to go up. The left-hand side is banked. You can see the bank on it today, and it's banked the whole way around up to the top. For that reason, the trees on the far side are bigger than the trees on this side. And the ones on this side fall down more often than the ones on the far side, right? Because they're on soft dug soil, whereas the ones on the other side of the avenue are on solid natural surface. The trees are all lime. Is it called European lime? I'm not a great man on plants. I think it's called European lime. But there's one different one. On the far side, the sixth tree is different from all the others. And to those of us who lived around the square, we used to talk about meeting at the sixth tree. It was a sort of a meeting. It doesn't have... Look at it the next time you go up the avenue. The sixth one on the far side is different from all the others. I don't know what it is. Is it a beech or something? It's not lime anyway. I don't know why they put an odd different one on the far side. Right? And this is the Belfast Steps, as it was about 1901. The farmyard is there and so on. Now this is what remains of the Belfast Steps, right? And I haven't been down there in a long time to actually know what's down there. But the Belfast Steps were originally built just like steps where a boat could come up and you step off the boat onto them. But the stones in it are worked stone, right? You see the holes in them? They've come from somewhere. They weren't done like that out of Concord wood. I think it's possible they came from the original ruined castle that was here, and they mark a place maybe where there were bars, like a prison cell. You know, see the holes in it? The bars for windows. They're like window sills or doorsteps or something. They're lovely rectangular blocks of stone. They've been worked, okay? And holes have been put. Now, there's not the same number of holes. Oh, some of them have 4 down the middle, but some only have 1 or 2 at each end, right? There's a different sort of selection in it. Anyone who plays golf will go down and look at those steps again, and just to see what do you think they are? What?
It's all over.
Sorry?
It's all over.
Oh, is it? You can't get down to them. All right. It's a year since I've been at them. But that someone took a photo. Has that photograph? Someone give me that photograph. That's the Belfast steps. Okay. And that, of course, is one of Lawrence's best. Now there is here. No, this is what you're talking about. This thing here. No, that's looking down from the Shrubbery Hill here, down over the lake.
No, just as you're walking up towards on the pathway, on the left hand side there's a bush in the middle of the field, and if you go in underneath that bush, there's a construction in there that possibly was the tank where that pumped the water off from the lake.
Yeah, but the one down below, I think this is another pump as well. I think the hill's so steep there would have been maybe 2 pumps to get the water up to the Hope Castle from the lake. That I think is a pump as well, right? And it's on the side of the, up to the top of the Shrubbery Hill and look down, and it's in that field in front of you. And there's very little left there, but I think it's another hydraulic pump. And of course you can see clearly in this picture, Otter Island North, Otter Island South, Crane Island North, you can see all the islands in that part of the lake. So you now know, and you can tell all your friends, that you know the names of all the islands on the lake, and you can tell them all the histories of it, or at least you probably think you can. Right? Sorry, Paul?
Just at Sam's point, you haven't mentioned that Comiskey's, it used to be a swimming place for people in Japan used to go out swimming. There's a sandy basin on it. But beside that, there's a building similar to the ice house. It's still there, all brickwork, and there's a fire pit underneath it. And I think it was built as a sweat house. So you go in swimming, and then the building was heated when you were in swimming, and then you can you sweat everything in the sweat house. And it's just
beside Comiskey's?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And that's where Sam's point was.
Yeah.
And that's where Sharky Man someday.
You can never be quite sure what some of these things really are. Whether reused from something earlier or. And is it on the maps, the Northern Survey? No. Yeah, some of them could be after 1910, in which case.
And the other story then is from McMahon's Castle. The legend has it that there's an underground tunnel that goes out onto that island.
No, there is. Yeah. Tell you what, today the American government couldn't build a tunnel under our lake. It's that deep. The idea that 6 boys with shovels could dig tunnels under the lake doesn't make sense. The story of the other tunnel is that the castle here, when it was captured by the McMahons in 1641, Lord Blayney, that's the second Lord Blayney, was not that he escaped. Now his family were taken prisoner, but he wasn't. And they invented a legend that there was a tunnel and he could go down, and he went down onto an island on the lake and escaped. They couldn't have dug a tunnel. They didn't have the manpower, and they didn't have the engineering skills to dig.
There was a tunnel found by the county council when they were.
They found the cellars, right? There's a cellars, all right. There had to be cellars. The building is so tall, you needed foundations, and there would have been cells and cellars and, let's say, tunnels in between the rooms underground. There's no tunnel going out under the lake. Definitely not. That's an impossible structure. Now, if someone can take me down and walk me out, and take me out on an island in the lake, I'll believe it. But until I see the wounds in his hands, I won't believe it.